So, hello, Chris. It's great to have you once again with us to continue our so far series about pricing, about things that people need to know in their day-to-day business. And today's topic is going to be competition data, a very sensitive, a very topic that people usually talk about a lot. But I'm not sure if everybody, when saying competition data, refer to the exact same thing.
So when it comes to the context of the data, first of all, I think that for some of the companies, competition data is much more important than for the others. So first of all, if you're a distributor, if you're working in the very competitive market, if you're working in the commodity business, so for example, you are selling water, you are selling coffee, you are selling things that are easily available, then competition data is much more important for you because price has more important role in the decision making. If you are not in the very competitive market, or you are a producer of some good that is only available to you, and you have some specific ideal customer profile, or you have some very specific product, then competition data can guide you, but most likely should not be decisive. If, again, you are working in commodity business, for many different products, competition data might be decisive. So number one, I would say context-wise, define in what market you are in and how important competition data is for you. Number one. Number two, once you know what market you are in, then you should define what competitors you should take into consideration. Frequently, what we are using while defining which competitors should be relevant for us, we are taking two information layers into the picture. The first one is the market share of the competitors. So how big they are in terms of a market share. The second one is growth/resources that they have. So think of it in the example. If the competition has a very big market share and has a lot of other resources, those are the market leaders, and most likely you should, I would say, attack them. So you should be very competitive versus them. Then competitors that have big market share but are not dedicated a lot of resources to this particular product category, market segment you are in, most likely those are the competitors that you should also attack, but not like directly, but grab as much as market share, dedicating more resources to the product categories that you are in. Then imagine that you have also competitors that they have like a very small market share, but they have a lot of resources. Most likely, those are the market entrants, startups that will attack you. So you should defend your position against them, right? It can be a startup. Also, it can be in e-commerce, it can be a very big marketplace that imagine you are selling beds, right? Or you are selling mattresses, right? And there is a horizontal marketplace that is focused on many different things and has never been focused on the mattresses, but there are mattresses categories there. So for now, they have a small market share because they were not focused there. But for some reason, they decided to open a job position for a mattresses portfolio manager or like bed portfolio manager, which means that in the nearest future, they might dedicate more and more resources to the category that you are like a leader in or you are competing in. So small market share, not necessarily meaning startup for some startups, but it can be also a big player that was not focusing on this particular product segment for the time being, and now the situation has changed, right? So you should be capable of defending your position against them. And of course, there are companies that have small market share and minimum resources. And those competitors you should disregard. This is very important because imagine that you have price of, I don't know, of some good and it is 1,000. And the big players have the same product for 1,100. This is important basket opener for you, which means that your price should be good for the conversion of this good. And there is a very small player that has exactly the same product for 800, right? But this player if you will adjust your prices to this particular player that should be irrelevant for you, you're effectively losing on margin and you are not getting more conversion through it because this player was quite small, was not investing a lot of in performance marketing to visibility of their website. So I would say that context wise, before you start any competition analysis, or maybe the first two analyses that you should start with are identifying what market you are in, commodity versus like non-commodity business, number one, or price sensitive business versus not price sensitive business. And then identifying what competitors you should focus on. Because if you're focusing on everyone who is present on the market and selling similar goods to you or next best alternative, this is most likely a recipe for failure because trying to please everyone is effectively pleasing no one, especially not yourself. Because typically, if you're trying to be only the cheapest player on the market, taking everyone who is selling similar things, effectively, you are not having any margin on your product. So I think that those would be the first two things that you should take into consideration while thinking about the competition.
It's perfectly clear and explaining that how to select actually, and this is what intrigues me, who to follow or who to match against or who to take into consideration. You said very, very correctly, and I have experienced this in the past, that when you are trying to follow more than 10 competitors, follow, monitor, or go against them, it's going to be a struggle. And usually you're going to take the hate for that. My question, though, because I want to ask something different, but you intrigued me right now, is let's say that, yes, you're not following everybody. 200 companies selling the same product with you in the same market. And you focus on 10, 20 max. How would you rank them? Because do you think that all competitors are the same important to you as a retailer or a wholesaler?
So let's deep dive into the market share and resources, right? So I would say that like I would take into consideration these two things. So when it comes to the market share, basically number of views that they are having, the media coverage that they are having, the common sense on the market. So like when you think about, I don't know, the provider of TVs, right? You would think immediately in CE region about MediaMarkt, 2, 3 local players, and that's it. And maybe one marketplace, right? So, I mean, especially when you are smaller, I mean, common sense and, just like your intuition, your knowledge about the market in terms of a market share can be good enough. If it's not good enough, if you are a bit bigger, take into consideration number of views that they are having on their website. So Google Analytics, the data that you can acquire through many different SaaS solutions. Number one. When it comes to the resources that they are having, if the company is focused exactly on your niche, I mean, most likely they are dedicating all the resources that they are having. So this is the question about the size, right? So resources is an exemplification of the size of the company. If the company is horizontal, so think of like let's say that you are selling loudspeakers, right? So I don't know, you are a provider of audio solutions to your clients, so you can buy speakers to TVs, speakers to PCs, webinars, speakers, microphones, stuff like that. And you have a company that is basically selling all of the tech. Right? So they are not only selling speakers, but they are also selling keyboards, TVs, PCs, screenplays, games, PlayStation, blah, 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 stuff like this, right? So horizontal player. Identifying if this is your competition that you should follow basically is trying to understand if they have someone who is responsible for this part of the portfolio. As a proxy, typically we are taking into consideration the LinkedIn data, and we are just checking if there is a particular role in this company for this part of the portfolio. So this is how I would create matrix. And then of course the question is like how to rank them in terms of the importance, because you can have already, like, if you're in the very crowded market, you can have like, I don't know, 80 players who you should follow out of this matrix solely, right? So typically it depends on, like, typically a good proxy at the very beginning is that you are trying to attack. You're trying to benchmark basically the competitors that are the biggest, number one. And I would say that 50% of your competition input should be from there. And then the others, your direct competitors, right? So the companies that are very close to you and are in the similar size, in the similar bucket, serving the similar ICP, right? So I would.
So you mix and match, actually, if I understand. Someone
Yes.
big enough in terms of range or revenue or whatever, or customers,
Mhm.
but also taking a bulk of people that are, of companies that are similar to you in sizes of employees, range, economics, and so on.
Let me give you an example. So we were working with furniture, mid-market furniture provider. So this company, so if you take into consideration the whole market, in the market that we were working with, there were two big marketplaces where you could buy furnitures, and they were pretty, I would say super popular, but quite popular in the space that we were working with. So they were giants, right? And we were like, okay, this is one category. Then there were like 5 to 7 companies that are furniture specific, but out of our range. So 10 times more, 10 times of the size that we were in. And they were around 5 to 7 competitors that were in our range, so similar size. And there were like 20 companies that were way below our range. So what we did, right? We try to understand how similar are the ideal customer profiles of our competitors versus ourselves. Number one, that is how we decided to delete out of the picture or take out of the picture one of the marketplaces, because we've realized that typically people who are buying there have a bit smaller wallets, and we identified this by the portfolio analysis. So we went on this marketplace, we tried to understand what products they are selling, and it turns out that 80% of the products that they were selling were cheaper than our cheapest products, right? So, similar segment, nevertheless, not the similar wallet of the portfolio of our potential prospective clients. Number one. Then the giants, right? We did exactly the same, but there we've tried to understand not only the price of the furnitures, but also the portfolio mix. And so we are diving deep into what data do you need. And then we've realized that, okay, there are bits and pieces of portfolio product segments that we should compete against them. But we've also realized that those clients they have much more competitors. They have much more accessories than we do. So it turns out that our portfolio consists of mostly sofas and wardrobes, where they do also have sofas and wardrobes, but on top of it, they have like 30 to 40% of the accessories. So very small products that you treat as an upsell. So then we decided to to benchmark the competitors that were against portfolio-wise similar to us. And then, of course, we took into consideration all the direct competitors. So out of, I don't know. And then when it comes to smaller clients, smaller competitors, we decided to disregard them for the time being while exercising the first pricing actions, right? So we took into consideration, out of initial, let's say 30 companies that we took into consideration, we ended up with five of the competitors that we should really aggressively position ourselves against, 5 of the competitors that we should monitor, and in case that they are doing any heavy promotions or heavy price actions, we should be aware of it and then decide if we should act on it, right? Because there is a very important consideration here that not every data point that you are receiving, it doesn't mean that you should act on this data point, right? You might just be aware of it and then decide if you should act on it. So imagine that someone is decreasing the prices of your margin drivers, and they are doing, and this is just part of some random promotion because the company has birthday or something like that. So most likely, despite lower sales for the time being when they are doing the promotion, you shouldn't deteriorate your value proposition by hardcore decreasing your prices. So we received this information and we decided not to act on it, which is, by the way, great, because If you don't have this information, after a month, you're just scratching your head and thinking, why my sales dropped so bad? Because it was a promotion there. Next time we should do promotion as well, right? And it would have been most likely a mistake, right? But if you didn't have this information, then you might have acted wrongly post factum, so to say.
I clearly understood. So far, we have made our very, very first step when we're dealing with competition data. The first thing we have to do is define our competitors, depending on their size and various criteria out of the whole, who are the important ones that we should monitor, regardless if we're going to act on them or not. I want to dive a bit more right now in understand what is the importance of this data. So we have defined these are my competitors, and I'm receiving data for them. Why are these data important, and what is the role when we're taking pricing decisions? Because you mentioned a bit about a promotion right now, but I want you to go a bit deeper right now. So how does this affect pricing decisions and shaping pricing strategy?
So there are two layers here. So the first layer is one of competition data that serves you as an information, as an input to your portfolio decisions, marketing decisions. And there is the second layer of data that you should monitor on the ongoing basis. So when it comes to the first layer, so let's assume that every half of the year, you're just scraping all the data from your competition in terms of the portfolio mix, and you're investigating what they are currently saying. And this serves you for the couple of things. First of all, to understand the portfolio mix. So you can understand that, this is your direct competition and what are the price categories that they are working with. So you take all the portfolio of yours and you bucket them by, I don't know, every 100. You do the same for the competition and you see how many products are sitting in which bucket. And it frequently turns out that you consider this as your direct competition, but I don't know, let's say 50% of your portfolio is above 500 euros. And for them, 80% of the portfolio is below 400. Right? So it seems that, marketing wise, positioning wise, you're the same. But if you deep dive into it, it turns out that their portfolio leans towards cheaper products. And this is the information for you, how you should structure your portfolio. You can, of course, decide to
So you start with an assortment analysis, let's say, of your competitor before doing anything else. That's
this
the
is like
step.
one-off, right? The first layer of the analysis, just to understand the status quo, if you're really competing versus each other. And I think you should refresh this analysis, I don't know, at least every year, right? So on the yearly basis to understand if you're competing for the same purchase. And this serves you as an assortment analysis to decide if you're introducing new products. You can decide, of course, okay, I am keeping my strategy. I am trying to address a bit higher end segment, or maybe there is a smaller market, or maybe there is a cheaper market segment that I was never addressing and that I should do something about this. So these new products that I will be introducing, let's try to introduce them at a bit lower end. So maybe a bit worse quality, maybe a bit more generic, but cheaper.
A brand analysis with this, right? I mean, you can see your competitor is bringing new brands that you weren't aware of, making some new deals possibly.
Of course. I mean, this can help you to understand, where and how you should play, right? So when it comes to your assortment. So this is like one-off analysis. I mean, of course, you can monitor this over the course of time, but I would rather say that it might be a waste of money. Just like be aware of it, see, and then take these decisions in terms of the portfolio. On the other hand side, there are some data that you should monitor on the daily basis, so to say, like constantly monitor. So the first question, why this is important? Because some of your products are very price sensitive. So we touched on this in our last session. But basically, there are some products in your portfolio that purchase decision is only driven by the price. So I will buy the cheapest option. If this is the situation with some of your products, and for sure 100% you have products like that, core value items. This is important because you should adjust these prices to be the cheapest on the market, of course, with some ground rules in place. So minimum margin, right? So I will not go lower than, right? Stuff like this. So this is important to know. But not only competition data, not only price data you should monitor, but also you should be aware of the stocks of your competition, right? And then the price will be visible. Typically, right? Even if the products are out of stock. So, for example, if you don't have pricing process in place and you were competing in this product segment for the price and competition was going lower and then they are sold out, if you haven't increased the price when the competition had their product sold out, most likely you lost a bit of a margin, right? Because the products were not available on the market or were not available at the cheapest price. So this is a good window for you to get a bit of a margin back from this particular product. So it is important to adjust prices for the prices that are super price sensitive. On the other hand side, it can also help you to understand which products are not price sensitive at all, right? So if you have a hypothesis that some of your products are not purchased because of the price, but this is a typically cross upsell, those are randomly bought, they are not very price sensitive. I mean, you can monitor what would have happened if you were, or what happens if you were above the competition, right? How much it hurts your sell, how much it hurts your conversion. So I would say that somehow, right? Most likely elasticity analysis, we've discussed it, right? So elasticity analysis taking into consideration in e-commerce only price, it is not enough typically because you also need to understand the marketing elasticity, which means that great, like, I am having better margins because I increased the price, but then it turns out that, the revenue per visit costed you like X, right? So you did like 20% up in terms of a first margin. But when you take into consideration the third margin, which is typically the margin after cost of shipment and cost of marketing, it turns out that, yeah, good, I did everything okay, but I lost anyway, right? So this is if you are taking only into consideration elasticity in terms of price, not in terms of on marketing costs, right? So very important notion here, because while I could agree on the elasticity in traditional retail, then taking into consideration e-commerce, then this, cost of the visit, basically performance cost, marketing cost are playing very important role. But you are 100% correct, because like you are correct in the sense of the goods that are not price sensitive, right? So to monitor what happens if you're increasing the prices, you are above the competition, if it really hurts your conversion. If not, then most likely it is worth to increase those prices. So I would say that on the ongoing basis, once you selected the competitors to like monitor, I would say you should observe, especially for the products that are very price sensitive, their price tags, and then act on it if they are going below your price tags with minimum floors of margin. Stocks, for sure. Promotions as well. So those are like at least three things that you should constantly monitor. Of course, it can be more of it, but I would say hygienically, those are the three things that you should be constantly aware of and have set of rules for price sensitive goods, how you should act if the price changes.
And I suppose that when you say that they have the set of rules, it's not going to be the same across everything, but it's going to be per category, subcategory, depending obviously always on the nature of the product, the price point of the product, the traffic of the product, and so on, right?
So this is very important, right? For everyone who is listening. There was a previous episode about core value items, foreground items, and long tail items, right? So core value items are the ones that are very price sensitive. So I would say that I would rather treat this in terms of price sensitivity than the category, because like categories are inputs to sensitivity. So what I would say is that, to give you an example, for one of the companies that I was working with lately, and they were distributors of clothes, very particular clothes. And then for core value items, the ones that were opening baskets for us, the one that were volume drivers for us, our rule were that if the same goods, exactly the same goods, very important, are going below our price tags, we will go 1 cent below. always, but like with the margin floor of XYZ, right? So let's say 20%. So we will never go below 20% margin. Then for the products that are on the foreground items, so like, more or less the price sensitivity is there, but like not to our margin of error there was 20%. So our price can differ 20% versus the competition. And then for the long tail items where they were mostly cross upselled through our through our platform, and they were not building our pricing perception in the eyes of the clients. Soy sauce again, right? Then we didn't like we were tracking it because like we could, but there was no pricing rule behind this, right? So the pricing rules there were pricing rules, but coming from different angles, not from the competition.
Totally understood. Of course, this applies. I totally agree with that. What I wanted to add on top of that is that when I mentioned categories, I mean, for example, we all know that the mobile phones category works with very thin margins, where on the contrary, an SDA category, kitchen appliances, small kitchen appliances, work with much higher margins. So to start with, before going to the specific products, you can start on the category level and set some ground rules because you don't have the same, let's say, fluctuation or the same allowance to play with the prices on the mobiles category or the SDA. I'm taking two extremes actually right now just to make it more obvious. So that's why I would start with a category and then go down, of course, to specific items based on their price sensitivity, if they're the long tail, if they're core items, if I have stock in them, and so on, and apply all the other rules.
You're 100% correct. I mean, it will be different for a coffee mug versus coffee versus TV versus phone, right? So the floor will be different, but the input from the competition stays the same, right? So it's just like, how much they are pricing, what is their stock, what is their promotion, and maybe some conditional promotion, stuff like that. And there are like other rules, which are conditional rules. So, specific rules that we decided to apply for the time being. I don't know. We are like, this is our core value item, but we decided not to follow the competition because in 2 weeks from now, we'll have a very big marketing action where we will have a very big marketing budget and we want to have those products available because we forecast that the sale of these products for this specific action will be very big, right? So, but of course, this is like a very random and happens like almost never.
I'm just trying to generalize to be able to help people and address people that are from different market categories, have different products, are of different sizes. So for a small shop, for example, it could be an easy way to start with the categories. I cannot go, if I only have 2 or 3 people that work with me, I might not be able currently to go into the depth that I need. So let me start safe with the category level and then try to focus slowly on the core items, identify them, have specific rules for them, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a major company that having a team of 20, obviously it's very easy to go and do a super analysis and then start having specific strategies for specific products under specific characteristics. By all means, but
Sure thing. Sure thing. So different rules to different companies, but like the inputs from the competition are very similar. I think this is what we can agree on.
of course.
Eh,
So
So
based on what you mentioned before, Christoph, you have to have the data, but to act on them. And the question is, how do you gather this data? You can gather it manually, automatically, semi-automatically, on your own. What's the process that someone can take on that?
So TLDR is like go to the SaaS solution, right? So I think this much better than I do how this data can be gathered. But like you can go to, for example, TGN data and get this data. And I would say that 95% of the companies are using the SaaS solutions. Of course, like we are in your podcast, other companies that are doing that. Let me just, for the hygienic reason, mention like, for example, price shape beyond TGN data to be very, very objective. But you can go there and buy it and buy the solution that monitors. I would say that 95% of the companies are doing it like this. Before there were two other options. So there were also the options that you are building the scraper yourself and like you have it internally, or there were made to measure solutions. So there were the solutions that were a low code solution that you didn't have to code it yourself fully, but you could use the solution that you could build yourself in like 2-3 days. I would say that this latter options, these two options, building it yourself and building it from the blocks, those options, I don't know, at least from my current outlook, those are off already. And I don't see many companies are doing that. I would say that using the SaaS solution, using the solution that can gather it for you, at least from my experience, worked much better because this is ideal use case. You always have this use case or build or buy, right? And sometimes it's better to build your own system because you need the flexibility, you need the adjustments, you need the tailor-made solutions, and that's great. But in terms of scraping the competition data, I wouldn't say that this is a build type of an option. It's rather a buy type of an option. That's why solutions like yours are, I think, doing good. Nevertheless, I'm still to be very honest, I'm still very surprised when starting a project with my clients that they are not using those solutions, right? Because, just to make it crystal clear, like we like each other. I am invitee to this podcast, but we don't have any paid collaboration. So I'm just being as objective as possible. But honestly, I am very surprised because this is, of course, sometimes cheaper, sometimes expensive. But I think nobody could claim that it's not valuable, right? I mean, most of the companies are, at least for some of the parts of the portfolio, are competing on the price. I mean, that's the reality. No matter what value you're generating, how cool you are, how much you've spent on your branding, some of the products are price sensitive, full stop, and you'll be competing on the price. I'm sorry?
And the availability that you have in your
And
application as well.
of course. So, but you will be competing on those two things, which basically means that, the other part of the story is pricing is the strongest lever, right? So no matter how much you're going to spend on the marketing, if the price sensitive good is 2 times more expensive than your competition, like everyone will window shop at your shop and then find cheaper somewhere. So I think even if you are not acting on it, being aware of this information already produces the value. There was one study that was telling us that, only knowing, not acting on it, having the information for managers make them 20 to 50% more productive, right? Because, they have this information in the back of their head and they're not maybe directly acting on it, but they're strategizing around this, which makes them more efficient and makes them more comfortable with taking the decision. So basically, I would say go and buy the solution.
One question, because when I first started working in the e-commerce, this was 2 decades ago, most of the companies that I worked with and then noticed were gathering this data manually. And when I'm meaning manually, I mean enter in a website, if it was online in the e-commerce, going to the product and writing down in an Excel file or a spreadsheet the price and going and had huge teams of doing exactly this thing. And also on the physical stores, they were sending employees to the store next door on the corner with a notebook and writing the codes and the price. Do you see this still happening?
For the physical stores, as a proxy, sometimes I would say that if you want to have sometimes like a very simple solution, if you just want to have a proxy, just want to have not statistically relevant data, but just get a feeling, just going to the store and taking doing even shopping at your competition, can work. But then for e-commerce, look, if you're not efficient, you will be gone basically. And, sorry for being that straightforward, but looking at the market, how AI is changing how we work, how efficient we are, how much of the work is getting automated. If you're lagging with this, you could have lagged with this 5 years ago, 7 years ago, because doing it manually via intern that was just doing that was relatively cheap for you versus using a software was a was a big difference in terms, most likely the software was cheaper anyways, even if not cheaper, more precise and more dynamic. But the difference was like, it was a difference, but let's say big difference, but not gigantic difference, right? Right now, with the companies being much more efficient, using AI to generate pack shots, content, stuff like this, we are in the efficiency war, basically. So if you're just doing manually this, I mean, you can, of course, feel free, but to be very honest, with margins being more tight, with companies being more efficient, with market concentrating, with also a general situation in the world, I mean, I think that those companies can't afford so much of an inefficiency. So I would say, yeah, that's it.
So you're very clear. Get it software to get you the prices to be more efficient. And since
Yeah.
we mentioned the manual pricing that and implied the time it takes, the efficiency is, in my perspective, related to the frequency actually that this is happening, because ideally everybody wants as real time data as possible. So, in your perspective, how often should businesses, of course, varies as the products are different? How often do you think they should gather this data, process this data? And if you can give me some examples where timing is critical in their pricing decisions.
So I would say, the more dynamic you are, the better it is, especially for the prices that are products that are price sensitive. That's it. And I will give you a very specific example, because this is what happened to us like a week ago. So we had a company that was reaching out to us, and they were selling like appliances, but also clothes for the doctors. And for some reason, they had a very big stock of one particular product, and they were not monitoring the competition, and their competition realized something on the market, which was based on the situation in the Middle East, that they decided to increase the prices drastically, right? So, and basically, what I mean by that, I mean there was a very big demand for one specific good due to the macroeconomic situation, right? Due to the situation in the Middle East, and they had their whole stock evaporated in, like, I don't know, 2 days or something like that, because they did not realize that they could easily increase these prices twofold. And one could say that, yeah, fine, you don't have to be expert in macro politics, economics to run your e-commerce shop. You don't have to. But then if you would have had the data around your competition, most likely you were to spot this situation. And of course, and just to make it crystal clear, this was not like a tragic situation that companies were super greedy. It was like normal, typical business situation. Just the supply was harder, so you could work with the price. So this is an extreme situation, but just happened to us a week ago, and the client was very upset because they didn't have a stock. They wanted to use the stock later on. They were much cheaper, so their stock evaporated, and then this product was resold. Their particular product was sold with a higher margin on the marketplace. Someone just decided, bought it, took the 3,000, 4,000 products and then resold it somewhere. So not great if you think about this. But there are also much more down to earth situations, right? So you are seeing that competition is going down with the prices because I don't know, they are more efficient, or they are thinking in terms of they need cash, right? They have some cash flow perspective. And you know that if you will not decrease the prices of their product, you will not upsell the things that are high margin for you, right? So I think, trying not to go to the trivias, right? But thinking about, like, answering your question, I think especially on the core value items, the more up to date you are, the better that is.
So the up to date would mean what? Once per day, once per week, 3 times per day, once per month.
But
What's your ideal scenario? I mean,
ideal scenario is live. The question is how many times you're acting on it, right? So just let's separate two different things: information and acting on it, right? So the more precise information you have, the better it is. But I would say on the daily basis, if you have an update and you are acting on it by the end of the day, most likely you're fair than like 90% of the competition. But of course, companies that I used to work with like long time ago that were gigantic company, they were even changing it live, right? So this can happen as well.
That's why I'm asking, because if somebody is not acting on information, and I'm asking for, and that's why I'm bringing the frequency in the play, it might create more noise actually. I started bothering them and eventually not acting on them because I'm getting a spam like information. I'm not acting on it.
And this is like that's why like the initial step is very important, right? So if you're just adjusting your prices and your whole portfolio based on competition, most likely you're missing something, right? The most important product, those are the ones that you should act on quite frequently, but not all of them, right? I would say 10 to 20 products should have dynamic rules, and you should adjust them, I would say, automatically, but not more than 10%, let's say, let's say, right? So we typically, the rules are they're stacked, nested, right? They're nested rules. So the first one is like this 20% of portfolio, you should adjust the prices automatically if the competition changes the price. But margin shouldn't be lower than if the price change is more than 10%, there should be manual acceptance of the human, for example, right? So this is like a nested rule to eliminate the noise, and that's it, right? I would say just bear in mind that this process should address only the fraction of your assortment, not the whole assortment.
So to always be within the market, but at the same time have a manual inspection if something tries to derail.
Exactly. And then, of course, like, rarely it's down to the cent, right? So only in a very particular situation is down to the cent, right? So it's 4.99, someone is doing 4.98, so you should do 4.97, right? I mean, you do have some flexibility here, which basically means that you change the prices only if, I don't know, it's more than 5% of the or 3% of a price change, or like 10 cents, something like that. Of course, it depends, right? The more expensive goods are rather using the percentage. In cheaper goods, you're using the cents. So those are the details. But in general, I would say that you need to have a nested rules, and in order to and they serve to eliminate the noise that you are just referring to.
Since you mentioned the noise, I would like you to elaborate on the challenges actually that the competition pricing analysis can generate, like it's the noise, like it's the accuracy, maybe the complexity, or some risks that are involved in that.
So and the first one is analysis paralysis, right? So I will go back to the first part of our conversation. If you're monitoring too many competitors, you find yourself in analysis paralysis. So you're taking too many data points into consideration. And if you're not big enough, you can't comprehend it, so you will not act on it. Number one. Number two, just repeating what I said, but just to make it crystal clear, you shouldn't adjust the prices to the whole portfolio. At least you should have a categorization of products that are high, mid, and low price sensitivity, and most likely the most important for you are the most price sensitive products. This for all of your products, this will most likely deteriorate your margin. Number two. Number three is matching. So I will make it the extreme case, right? So the H&M white T-shirt is not a Versace white or Burberry white T-shirt, right? So you can understand this as the same white T-shirt. Nevertheless, matching the products and making sure that you're comparing apples to apples or next best alternatives to your products is important. So this is frequently a mistake where we are, for example, we had this situation with matching with beds, right? It was like we were matching and like the images, like the descriptions were very but our client, due to the manual work, was matching the plastic bed to the bed, right? The wooden bed is typically 2-3 times more expensive than like some plastic bed, right? So false positive. I would say that this is a risk here again. And then the fourth risk, and I think this happens the most often, is not acting on your data at all. So I see Of course, having this information is important. I think that even observing this information will help your business. But if you don't act on it and if you don't measure this at all, you will basically turn from the solution. You will see competition data as a failure, but I think that we can all agree that it should be important. So, if you don't have the pricing pyramid, if you don't have any pricing skills, but you want to just start with it, I would say observe the competition and adjust, I don't know, 5% of the portfolio. And then what is very important, see what happens, right? My conversion increased or decreased, margin increased or decreased. How much time do I spend on this, right? And if you're adjusting 5% of your portfolio based on competition, take another 5% as a control group. So you can't analyze this as in the vacuum. So let's say that you have 10% of the portfolio products that are high price sensitive. Competition is changing prices for this 10% of your portfolio. Adjust 5% of it just to see what happens if you're below them, and then don't do anything about the additional 5% and see if your conversion dropped or not. Right? So I would say that this is quite important. Acting on it is quite important because I have seen many, many companies that were using this data and they find it irrelevant because they didn't know how to act on it. So I would say that this is basically of course, if you're just doing it bluntly, if you are just adjusting everything and you're going below margins, if you don't have any floors, this will basically harm your business a lot, right? But this is like immediate risk. I would say the long-term risk is like having this data and not using it effectively. And this is like a slow killer, right? The ones that I've mentioned that were like immediate harm. That the latter is rather a small, is a thing that is slowly killing your business.
It's very interesting what you're saying because it creates to me some other thoughts. You're saying that you should act on it, do changes, price sensitive products. If everybody is doing that, wouldn't this eventually lead to a price war? So how can businesses tackle with a price war, avoid it, not engage, and not go down the rabbit hole, which we all know that doesn't end well?
So I think that the starting point is I think a pricing man book where like the author Simon Kucher, he put an evidence that price war, there is no winner in the price war, right? Everyone is losing, right? Effectively a bad thing for businesses, like stating the state of obvious. But I think that this is important to say at the very beginning in our context, of course. The second one is like if you're just adjusting it bluntly without any strategy, you might end up in the price war, and everyone will be blaming each other. Having some pricing floors, having some margin floors, this is what can protect you. Of course, if someone have started a price war with you, you need to act on it. And unfortunately, the sad reality is that if your competitor that is like 10x bigger than you have 20x marketing budget and selling the same goods as you are selling, I mean, you not longer have a pricing problem, you have a general business problem, and you need to find other avenues of growth, right? So I don't want to say that I have some golden recipe if company that is like 100 times bigger than you, international, selling exactly the same products, is trying, or very frequent situation nowadays, producers are going D2C, right? And you are your distributor, you had your nice e-commerce, and then the producer came and said, hey, look, we'll have our e-commerce in your market as well, and we will be cheaper. We can do the business together, but I mean, good luck. Right. So then you need to find about other avenues of growth. And unfortunately, if you're just solely dependent on one product type, on one ICP, if someone is trying and someone is bigger and stronger than you and trying to attack you, you are basically in a very challenging situation to be. I wouldn't say that if I don't want to swear, but.
You're trying to differentiate actually in other parts beyond pricing. If it's something that right, yes, exactly.
Portfolio markets, right? Yeah, like very directly answering your question. Have a price war, have a price floors, have a margin floors, make sure that you are not adjusting prices on everything, and that should be fine. If you have a bigger guy, a bigger client, much bigger company trying to attack you, I mean, you will not, like, you need to find different avenues of growth rather than pricing, because pricing most likely will not help here.
And within this context, is there any industry specific need where data matters more, or in other industries that matters less?
And this is, I will make it super straightforward. It matters the most in the commodity business, number one, then a bit less, but still extremely important in the very crowded markets that are like red ocean specific. Then it matters less if you're a producer yourself and you have your own goods, you're not in the commodity business. You're basically, as a rule of thumb, the easier is to compare your products, the more important it is.
Understood. I think this wraps it up.
Because this is very simple. I could, of course, like talk about it like 40 minutes and give you like tons of examples, but I would say super simple. Look, if someone can compare your goods towards the goods of your neighbor, of your competitor, then price will be more important. If you have specific design, the products are yours, you have love brand, I mean, the price will be less important, which means that the more comparable it is, the less specific it is, the more important is the data.
I love this sentence because it really summarizes. It's the essence of how where pricing is important. And I have never thought of it this way, even though I've been using it this way. I would have to summarize in just a few words. So we have all this competition, let's call it external data of what's happening in the market, having visibility with your competitors, knowing what to do, having your processes. In our previous talks, we discussed also of the, let's call it internal data, my costs, the demand, my metrics from my website, my footfall in the store, and so on. So at this point, I think we should see how all this can be combined actually and create a balance and use them effectively. All this data, all this different data, this sometimes contradicting data.
So I would say that this touches very well the point that you've mentioned before, right? So I mean, for the company products that you're competing on price, I mean, all the other data will be less important. I would say, of course, it can serve as a control group. For example, we are decreasing our prices based on competition, and we should all, of course, see the revenue per visit. So things that we discussed in our previous episodes, right? Then the further the further it goes down the line of price sensitivity, so it's less price sensitive, then you should focus much more on the internal data, right? So what you can see. What else? Think that some of the data, there's this concept of leading and lagging indicators, right? So leading is something that shows you at the very beginning, and lagging is something that follows the leading indicator, right? To give you an example, leading indicator is number of visits. The more visits I have, the lagging indicator will be revenue, right? So you can see, oh, I have more visits. Okay, after a week, I see more visits, more conversion, more revenue, right? So here I would say that sometimes internal data can be leading indicators to competition data, right? So, for example, you see that you have more revenue per visit, right? Which basically means that most likely competition increased prices, right? Because you didn't do anything, and then your sales are better. Most likely competition has increased the prices.
Don't have it in stock.
Or they don't have it in, and that might be counterintuitive, right? Because you can use it like this and you can treat it like this, but it should be vice versa, right? So you should first, because it is available data online. So instead of waiting for you to realize that something has changed, you can use the competition data and understand it immediately and maybe act on the price, right? So I would say that that this is how I would use it. Of course, sometimes it might feel conflicting. So I decreased the price and my conversion dropped. So this is, I would say, a sense check, right? So for example, if you have seen the situations like this, so that you adjusted your price to the competition, and then for some reason your conversion is going down, which is counterintuitive. Maybe, for example, you were serving a different audience than they did, right? And maybe they were serving a very price sensitive audience, and for some reason your audience, I don't know, has bigger wallets, is more rich, blah blah blah, stuff like right, and they prefer to buy more expensive goods. So I would say that internal data frequently can be a sense check, and they should definitely go hand in hand, right? So via competition data, like competition data is external data that should influence the internal data. So I wouldn't say it's one or the other. They should go hand in hand.
They complement one another, of course. So we can say that the internal data is the frame, actually, and the competition data is what happens within this frame and how it's being adjusted.
It's one of the inputs, but this input is super important, especially for a very price sensitive products.
Great. I think you have answered all the questions that I had so far. You tell me the competition data. So, any final thoughts from your side? So, how this external data or the reporters have some final thoughts on what we just discussed?
Do it.
It's another brand, actually.
True. No, but jokes aside, I would say do it and act on it, right? So start observing your competition and start acting on it. So once, like again, there are some hygienic risks like margin, etc. I mean, this should be covered. This should be covered. But then, if you're buying this data, if you're using these solutions, make the most out of it and start experimenting with pricing. Because most likely, if you only had the internal data, you have many second thoughts that, yeah, I would increase these prices based on the revenue per visit. I'm afraid, I'm not sure. What if competition has lower prices, blah, blah, blah. So you'll find hundreds of excuses not to do it. But if you have competition data, you already should have the whole picture, right? So if you have Google Analytics data, your revenue data, and competition data, you have it all just to act on your prices. So I would say treat it as an investment. If it provides you in the first test an ROI, great. If you're at zero, great. If you lose, yeah, this is an investment from the first test, second test, but then adjust your prices based on competition for maybe some of your most important products in terms of opening the basket for your clients, and then measure it, right? So I would say that very big importance, especially for most price sensitive products. I think that start. This is my final. I would say that this is like very basic but quite important final thought.
Chris, what would be your advice towards, comes to my mind, two types of companies. Number one, the companies that don't yet have at all or not reliable internal data. The question is, should they all start with external data or should they wait, the first category? And the second one, if there are companies where their, let's say, competition is mostly stable, would you advise them to go and deeper and deep and dive deep into the competition data, and why?
So I would say for the first situation, let me challenge this. If you're paying taxes, you already have all the data you need. So you need your sales in order to start working on your prices per ID. That's it, right? Of course, the more deeper you are, the more data you have, the better it is. But if you're selling in the e-commerce, you are plugged into Google Analytics and you have your sales. That's it. I of course would like to challenge that that you don't have reliable data. You do, right? I mean, or at least most of the companies should have it. Of course, we have some challenges with the systems. If their data is not integrating enough, we're at the very early stage. I would say early stage. I would say it depends, right? If you should use the competition data, because what's the challenge, right? If you don't have internal data, it is hard to measure the success about your price change. But you can even measure it as a proxy of your conversion from Google Analytics. That data you should have. I mean, conversion is a pretty basic KPI that you should observe, right? If you're feeling that you are in the very competitive market and competition is like very aggressive, even if you don't have like crystal clean internal data, conversion should serve well enough for the first proxy, first test. But of course, in the ideal scenario, first solve the basics, then go more advanced, right? It's question number one. And the question number two, you need to remind me.
Question number two is there are many companies where they say that my competition is pretty
Stable.
much
Understood.
stable.
I
They don't
remember.
fluctuate much. I know more or less what they're doing. So do I really need competition?
So there is a very easy answer to it. It's not critical for you, but it can be a very good source of the competitive advantage. So if nobody is doing anything about the competitive data, why you shouldn't be the first one to start? Which basically means that mm, it is again not critical, right? Because if it's very stable and you are happy with your business and you don't want to work around this too much, yeah, I mean, forget about this. But if you are not doing that, someone will have this idea. At some point, I mean, this situation will change. Someone will have an investor that has a very strong KPIs to follow. Someone will have the new board member who want to grow the business. It's a race, right? Someone will get this data, and if they will be ahead of you, it will be harder for you to compete, right? And most likely you will only see that after half of the year when they are, down the road 6 months already and they are much more advanced, which means that you need to dedicate even more resources to catch up, right? Which is inconvenient for you, stressful, etc. So I would say that if you're in a very stable market, most likely, this can be the source of your growth. So again, right? I don't want to, like, no matter what question you ask, I will answer, yeah, this is important, because it is a trivial thing, right? The more data you have, the more information you have, the more analysis you can conduct, the more efficient you can be. Of course, you need to made to measure, tailor it to your situation. If you're in a very stable market in the very early stage, and you're just starting with your e-commerce, you've been there for like 2 years, you don't have like spectacular growth, yeah, fix the basics, make sure marketing works, do some pricing test based on the internal data, blah blah blah, stuff like this. But if you're in the like 200 million e-commerce business in the stable situation, I mean, managers, different people into organization, people coming and going, they have seen competition data working in the different scenarios, they want to apply it here. So this situation, the only constant thing in the business is change, right? So
And taxes.
yeah. So
I'm very happy you said that because I have been asked these questions many times. And actually, my answer more or less is similar to yours. Yes, do it. You might not need it right now, but it's something must have visibility on because you don't know when change is going to knock on your door. You cannot be found unprepared.
Of course, especially now where the world is changing like very, very fast.
Yeah, that's true. So, Chris, thank you very much once again. It was lovely talking with you once again on this very interesting matters, subjects.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
I think very, very shortly we're going to talk to each other again. I think we have many things to discuss down our path. So, rendezvous until the next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I hope that it will be helpful for the audience. And then if you friends have any questions, let us know. And I hope we can answer them somehow.
Of course we can. Just write in the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.